Good evening. My name is Craig Rice. I'm with the Film Society. I want to thank you for coming. Good evening. We're going to be going through a series of conversations that are stimulated by a series of films that were set up. I just want to thank you for joining us. These chat formats, if you want to ask questions, go to the Q&A button, which is at the bottom. Type in whatever question you want to ask us as a group, or you want to ask a specific person, and I'll get to the questions. I will do that as quickly as I possibly can. I'll answer them for you. This film series was made possible thanks to John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, O Cinema, and Magnolia Films, and the Film North and Minneapolis St. Paul Film Society for the support for these free screenings. I think these screenings have been something that we've been trying to do to address certain issues here this has been happening over the last several weeks, and bringing some new awareness to people has been kind of what we want to do. Part of this story that I want to tell is that the story of America is the story of Blacks in America. It's about the racism as power that has established sort of oppression in this country and a control of some of the economics here. The issues that we have here we're going to address based on a film that was, hopefully you watched, that was shown on Sunday called Whose Street. Whose Street is about Ferguson. It took place in 2014. My guests tonight are Mel Reeves, who is a journalist, reporter, and editor at Minneapolis Spokesman-Recorder. I also have D.A. Bullock, who is a filmmaker, activist here in Minnesota, and Aaron Smothers, who is an activist writer here in town here. And I want to thank you guys for coming. I think it's great that you guys could make it, and I really wanted to kind of do this panel with all three of you. I know all of you from different situations in my life, and so kind of this is like for me, it's almost like a club. So I'm glad you guys should be here. So thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
One of the things that I think that after seeing the film Whose Street, and hopefully everybody out there has a chance to see it, is that the police department in Ferguson starts to evolve into almost a monstrous organization. And I think that we've seen individual police shootings through the internet over a period of time. But in this film, we actually start to see the pure militaristic approach that the police department has evolved into. I was in LA in '92 for the LA riots, and I did not see this. This is something that's been developing, and people have said that they started getting this process after 9/11 as they started getting training for terrorists. You guys are out in the streets, and I really want to sort of get an idea of, kind of the evolution of this situation that turned from a protest into sort of a police action. I mean, obviously not on the same level as Ferguson, but close. So let's talk about that for a little bit here.
Yeah,
start, Aaron. Go ahead, D.
No, I was just saying, like, it's eerie, the similarities about the deployment after, the police violence that happened and killed George Floyd, the police violence that happened that murdered Michael Brown. It's eerie to see the similar deployment when it comes to, folks taken to the streets and the protest happening. You had the same deployment of less than lethal weaponry and the chemical weapons. You had the same sort of deployment against our whole First Amendment, which is the right to protest, but it's also the rights of freedom of the press. And you saw the same police tactics. So, I think it's a valuable lesson for people who have this idea that reform is possible. Like, you haven't seen any reform in the actual response. Even the bringing in of the National Guard, exactly the same. Some of the same language was used.
Yeah, I just think that it's very interesting in dealing with the police, how we keep realizing these same repeated patterns where we lose a life to police brutality. We show up in force peacefully to try to rally for the people that we have lost, to try to stand up for our right to have equal rights just like everyone else. And every time we seem to gather in large gatherings, not through our own causes, chaos always seems to erupt. And when that chaos seems to erupt, the media always seems to want to focus on the looting aspect and the showing the people of color actually causing all of this chaos. And it feels like it's almost like a form of degradation that they're doing. And these patterns keep showing up in media throughout history. Every time we try to rise up, every time we try to show that we are a unit, that we are cohesive, that we are here, and we want to not be murdered in the streets by people just for existing, it seems like chaos always follows us as a way to deter us from actually getting the message across that we are trying to get across. And I think there's something to that. I feel like that pattern keeps showing up so frequently that there has to be something to it, especially if all these people are constantly saying, we're not destroying our home. We're not trying to destroy the things that we care about. We are trying to keep the lives that we grow in these individual communities, whether it's Mike Brown or George Floyd. We're trying to keep these people alive from the police brutality and these people that are trying to kill us. So I just think it's very interesting that we have this continued pattern of every time we show up in droves to do something peaceful, chaos always ensues, and I don't believe it's us. Same thing for the George Floyd incident when everything kicked off at the auto zone. That was not a person of color that burned down that auto zone. That was a gentleman who showed up in an umbrella and a gas mask. He was a Caucasian gentleman, and he started breaking those windows and set that place ablaze. So like it just seems very strange that it follows us everywhere we go, but we never seem to be the initial instigators of the violence.
You have thoughts about that, Mel?
I was trying to figure out where we jumped off of. What was your initial question?
Oh, we were talking about, I'm sorry, no, initially we were talking about things that have not changed since the Ferguson, since what was in Hood Street, how this militarization aspect of the rioting and the whole escalation has started to grow,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's to be expected. I think DA hit on something. The beauty of what's going on now, we've never seen, at least most of us not seen in our lifetime what we've seen as a response to George Floyd. So things are different. And the police responded similar, but it was paradoxical because when they pushed down that 74-year-old man, the cops were fired and actually charged. Cops have been charged all over the country with crimes as a result. In Atlanta, when two people were snatched out of their cars and maced and tased, they were fired right away and charged. So you see what you have going is a bit of a paradox. So the police, a lot of the police make up they're kind of a right-wing force unto themselves. The police federation is kind of a right-wing force. And it makes sense because despite what they tell us, different departments do different things. But overall, they look for people who are sociopathic. Every department needs a few psychopaths who just will beat up on people and have no feeling about it. They need a few racists. I wrote a piece about it in my blog. I'm gonna do a pitch here, Craig. Since you misintroduced me, I am a journalist, but I am very well known as an activist.
Yeah, activist journalist. Sorry.
Everybody knows me. Brother DA knows me as an activist, first and foremost. Everybody does. I write my butt off, but everybody knows I'm out in the street. And you have people running around talking about them organizing. I actually have done some organizing. Yeah. We'll talk about that hopefully later in the show because that's an annoyance of mine. But they have done some of the similar things. In fact, I wrote a piece about that we're protesting police violence, and yet they're being violent because some of them are opposed to what we're doing. Some of them hate us. Remember, they're part of a little gang, a squad of right-wing folks. These are the people who are going to be a real problem if a revolution actually is made. And let me point out something about when the president was talking about calling out the troops. So you saw the Pentagon push back, right? You all know what's different here. You know why the Pentagon pushed back? Because they recognize that most of the troops agree with the people in the street. You understand what I'm just saying? The Pentagon recognized that Trump is just selling wolf tickets. If they sent their federal troops out in the streets, they may have a problem because the troops would identify with the people. And these are the troops that we need if stuff really comes down where people decide they've had enough. The troops are going to identify with the people. And the Pentagon was smart enough to know if they put them troops out there, they were going to demoralize them. Think about it. You sit the troops on their mothers, brothers, sisters, families, friends, etc., folks they like, they're not going to do a very good job of going over and fighting somebody else on behalf of of this power structure or U.S. imperialism. So some things happen really differently.
I mean, do you think that, I mean, to your point about the police department, I mean, the police department has, I think, has sort of turned into a street gang. They have the same kind of crew mentality that a regular street gang would have. They just happen to be the biggest gang in the neighborhood. It's their streets, you know, that's the way they approach it, and they block it out. Do you think they actually understand that all this antagonistic behavior start to create the way people start to look at them? I mean, overall, not just people in our neighborhoods and stuff like that, but basically overall, you start looking at the police differently anymore. They were supposed to protect and to serve. That feeling is not there right now in this country.
I think with most, you know, authoritarian leaning personalities, they don't get when critical mass turns against them. They still feel like they're in control until the very end, or they want to, you know, clamp down even tighter to the very end instead of, you know, considering the options that they have in front of them. So I think you're gonna have some people who, you know, pretty much like the NRA from my cold dead hands, that they are going to go down with the sinking ship, even though they know it's taking on water, you know, constantly. And I think, you know, what Mel mentioned was really important as a distinction between what happened with after George Floyd's murder and what happened after Michael Brown's murder or Jamar Clark's murder or even, you know, Philando's murder. Was I think you now see a critical mass of white folks who are disillusioned, who, you know, it's a confluence of what's been going on politically, where you saw a lot of people responding to messages of economic populism and messages of, you know, just identifying who the enemy of the people are, and it's just a really tight-knit small group of folks who are, you know, being protected by the police or controlling a lot of what we have in our social. And so, you know, you saw a lot of those people, those disillusioned young white folks, coming to this protest, coming to this movement.
Yeah, I think this was a really multicultural, you know, this is what Malcolm X, not Malcolm X, this is actually what Martin Luther King said, this is the one America. This is, I mean, because there were some sisters out there and hijabs out there. I mean, this is a whole new look. I mean, the Native American community is doing this. You were going to say something, Mel, and I cut you off, but what were you going to say, Mel?
Gosh, I can't remember the point I was going to make. It'll come back to me.
Okay.
I think DA.
Aaron, what are you going to say?
I forgot what it was.
Yeah. So going back to the police feeling more like a street gang than more like an entity that is supposed to be here to protect the people, I feel like it's been like that for a long time. The moment that the police turned into a for the public entity, organization that is supposed to help people in need, which we have been properly educating police officers for a long time to help deal with a lot of the issues that they are tasked with going to actually aid in, people with mental disabilities, people that are going through extreme difficult situations. And then we are sending in people who are really only trained how to minorly diffuse a situation, and then they're going into those situations with guns on their hips, and you know, so they don't know the actual community that they live in. A lot of these police officers aren't from my street. All the police officers that I see driving around on a daily basis, they aren't my neighbors. They're people that come from out of town. And so that's the problem that we have, is that we have these foreign people coming into our communities. They're wearing these badges, they're forming this front of authority, but they don't have any hands in the community that they know these people. So that's how you kind of get that gang mentality, is because these people are coming in, they're demanding law, they're demanding order from you, and you don't know these people. And because you don't know these people and they're being hostile to you, they're not your neighbor, they're treating you any way they want to, they're not going to have that same care. So we continue to grow this divide between especially the people of color in the community and the police, because there's no cohesion. There's no community there. There's no connection there. And then if we have people who are, like Mel said, who are racist, who are acting like the enforcers in the police squad, people that are using the police to get over on people of color and continue to pollute the community, we're not going to have any cohesion. This friction is going to keep becoming a thing because we're not actually addressing the issue that we don't know our police force. We don't know these men and women that are supposed to be protecting us, just like they don't know us because they're not a part of this community. So why would they care?
It was an interesting thing that Darren Wilson said in there. It was the officer that shot Michael. That he said that to be a policeman you can't be racist, which is this is part of this mindset that they have that they are not. And when it's clearly you can't say that and actually understand what's been going on systematically for 100 years in this country. Before we start, I want to make sure the audience knows that there's a Q&A button. So we're open for questions. If you have questions, please type them in and I will try to address them to the audience. Go ahead, guys.
I was going to say, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. That he lied. He lied. I mean, he did. I mean, there's this thing that people think. Everybody. I mean, if you ever had an enemy or somebody that wanted to attack you, they didn't walk up to you and announce, "Okay, I'm your enemy. I'm going to attack you." Sometimes folks are backstabbing you, right? Sometimes your enemy comes at you sideways from behind your back, comes a different way. So we have to recognize that we are fighting an enemy. And the beauty of this moment now is we can tell the whole truth. So I've been saying this now for 30 some years. And so now I can say it and it makes sense. So there's no such thing as serving and protect. The police don't exist to serve and protect us. They never have. And under this system, they never will. That's propaganda. They can protect the rich people. They'll serve and protect some folks out of, and even they will hit them in the head if they step out of line. So the reason for the police is to serve and protect things as they are, and also to reinforce all the prejudices, all the stereotypes that exist in our society. That's why they even enforce the law the way they do. The reason they're in our communities and overreach in large numbers is because they want to send the message that our communities are much more criminal. Everything about the police force is this. That's why they reinforce the law. They enforce the law heavily in immigrant communities. It's why they beat up on women. It's why they beat up on the LGBT community. It's why they beat up on Muslims because they're carrying out what their job is partly is to reinforce the stereotype and to keep everybody in their place. And I like to say, when they hit you with that stick, they hit you with that stick to remind you of your place in society. All the stuff that we thought we knew was not true. In fact, one of the things I want to take on is I saw in the film where somebody was trying to talk to the cops. You can't talk to the cops. The cops are not on your side. I know it's a hard thing. It's what they have going for it because we're human beings. We want to treat people like human beings. But let me tell you something. When the guy in your neighborhood decides he wants to sign up and wear that blue uniform, I got bad news for you. The black guy that you like, he's not that same guy. He's on their side. And here's a kicker. He proves it over and over and over again. We just don't want to believe it. And I'll tell you, we can't win. We won't really be able to change the police as we know it if we don't understand who they are. As long as we kneel with them and hug them, run up in their faces as if they're the problem. No, Malcolm X said once, he said, listen, you got some, and this is the word he used. He said, you got some cracker doing something to you down south. You got somebody doing, he says, listen, you don't confront him. He says, you take it to the government. Because the government has the authority, the government has a responsibility of protecting you in this society. That's right. So what I always did was we always went to take our complaints to the city government, the county, and the state, because they can solve my problem. If my food is not good at a restaurant, it's a waste of time for me to be arguing with the cook. So I go talk to the manager or the owner who can actually do something about it, you see. And if they can't, then we know it's just a
Yeah, Amanda asked, she's wondering if there's enough black police officers in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area to actually have an adequate representation. It's like 90% white. Will educating the white officer be enough?
Well, my point is that it makes no difference. That's my point. We have a black chief, and several people have been killed already. That's a trick.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. That is absolutely a trick.
Yes, the Detroit Police Department is primarily black. The DC Police Department, which is overwhelmingly black, actually at one point killed more black people than anybody. Look it up. Look it up, because these are self-hating people more often than not. They're not your brother and sister once they put that uniform. And we got to stop falling for that trick. It's a trick. The policing is a system. That's why we say the whole daggum system is guilty. Yeah. It's a system, you all, and it's existed, and we know this since. I'm sorry, brother. It's existed since we had the slave catchers. That's where they come from. They were the original slave catchers. Then they were also the original folks that kept laborers in line. They have a long history of oppression. And we don't do our studying, so we believe, right, what we want to believe. Oh, they're good and bad cops. That's a bad formulation, because actually it doesn't stand the test of empirical observation. You don't ever see any cops intervening with somebody doing something bad. You don't ever see them filing a report. And when they do, they get fired. So I like to say the good cops quit. So the black cop thing is a trick. It's a trick, and if we're going to win this thing, if we're going to actually get real justice and a just society, we've got to understand what we're up against so we can toss it out and start anew.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people don't, and I'll get to you in a minute, Aaron, is that a lot of people don't understand that the police system in the North, not just in the South, but the North, came out of the slave, catchers. It's a process in America that was designed to be this. This is the force. I think that, one of the things that people think is that, and again, we can talk about this. I don't, I want to hear what you guys say. Do you believe that a community can actually create their own sort of police department in local areas? Do you think the community is ready for that amount of work that it would take to do that?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Aaron.
Okay, sure, I'll go. So yeah, I do want to go back real quick to what Mel was saying, in that I do agree that it doesn't matter what race or what the percentage of Black people who are police officers is inside of our police force, because like he said, it's not about the race you are. Once you decide to become a cop, it takes on a whole new thing. You're more following that badge at that point, and that's why the term Blue Lives Matter has always been so stupid to me. Because you're not, Black Lives Matter is supposed to bring representation to Black people matter equally as everyone else. We're not trying to take rights or saying we're not as equal. We're just trying to get the same equal as everyone else, just straight across the board. Blue Lives Matter and that whole concept is getting a bunch of people who have chosen a career path, and then they're, once again, that gang mentality, getting behind that gang mentality and more separating themselves from being a part of the public. I think at this point, honestly, with the deep-rooted issues that we have with the police department and the Black community and other communities, and how they keep, once again, trying to keep us in line, keep us in these places, keep us in these impoverished communities, help systematically oppress us, that yes, it almost comes to a fact now where it doesn't even feel so much like an option for people. It's more like a necessity. If we are going to be safe in our streets, if we're going to be safe in our home, if I'm going to lay down at night, if I have a wife and children and I'm a man of color, and I want to know that any event that someone breaks into my home, I want to have someone that I can call. And I can't and have not ever trusted the police force in my life to call them if I am in trouble. So I feel like at this point, we need to enforce some type of public community way to regulate and protect ourselves, because the way that we have been doing for this long has not been functioning, and it's only been terrorizing people and terrifying people with the way that the police force has run. They are using military weapons on us, on American citizens, and they're treating us like we're third world citizens. It has to stop.
One of the things that the director of Who Street, who I asked to be on this, she couldn't do it, was talking about to me when she showed this several years ago, about how she could actually watch the militarization of the police as it run from the protests and to the initial confrontation, and then they got more armament, more. It just kept. This again. I think there is a military, there is a soldier aspect that starts to creep into it. That is actually, I think, is somewhat frightening, because there's nobody wants to pull it back. They just want to keep more guns, more tanks, more soldiers, more bodies in the street. More armament. There's a process there. Do you think is there a moment in time where, and you guys are out there during this confrontation, when the protest turns into the riot? And I know in ours, one good thing, we got cameras now. Everybody's got a camera. We saw a lot of what's called white characters that were actually doing a lot of the initial damage that started igniting the riot. And I think it takes on its own life when it's like a fire. Once the fire starts, it starts to roar. Was there a time when you guys felt that there was a way that it was going the wrong way, the wrong direction from a protest to a riot?
Can I go back to
sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Your question about can we police ourselves? Basically.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
That's a large question of the day, and I want to contextualize that beyond just like sort of our reaction to what's happening right now, and talk about the modern day police, what we think of as police, only goes back to 1700s, early 1800s, and humankind and our ability to sort of form social groups goes back 90,000 years. So all of that time, we had to be self-governing and evolving along the way. And largely, we are self-governing about, a strong social contract in order to make society function. It doesn't function around this idea that I'm not going to hit you over the head because I think there's a police officer behind that door watching to see if I'm going to do that. We're functioning on a higher level most of the time, So most of the thing that we want police to show up for is this extreme antisocial behavior that they don't show up for in order to prevent it anyway. So people conjure up like their worst possible fear when it comes to thinking about can we survive and function without police. And in the reality, when those occurrences happen, the police show up afterwards to ask you questions about it and possibly, investigate it, but they don't intervene in those situations. Our best intervention is to strengthen a social contract where, people are not out there trying to do each other harm and displaying antisocial behavior. That's our best bet. Our best bet is not one police officer for every resident in our city.
You think that an older demographic can get on board with this and abolishing the police department, or whatever you call it, restructuring the police department? Do you think that would help ultimately? It's not taking anything away from Aaron's generation, but I mean, we have to have the police. We do have to have some type of policing force at some point in time.
And the question I would ask our older residents is just, like in your own lived experience, how often has it been a neighbor that's helped you out? How often has it been when it was time to really do some conflict resolution? Was it, the block getting together? How often was it that grandmother talking to that knucklehead and making sure that he was being held to, accountable for his actions? And how often was it really the police intervening and sort of changing the fabric of what was going on our block? And I think, even most older folks would admit when it comes down to when the rubber meets the road, it's about us banding together and figuring out a solution on our block or in our little small community,
I also think that with the restructuring of the police department, I really think we need to maybe view how we approach each individual case and how it's handled. Once again, I think a large part of the issue outside of the racism, the clear racism and terrible history that people of color have had with the police department is the fact that a lot of these police are really not trained to handle a lot of the people that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Like I said, a lot of these people are dealing with emotional issues or dealing with serious chemical imbalance issues and things that require way more sensitivity and way less of a heavy hand than what the police will usually walk in with, especially if you're dealing with a person of color, a person like me who is 6'4", big, muscular. If I am having a bad day or I am depressed and having psychotic episodes or feeling suicidal, that situation with the police can easily turn hostile. So I think when we are looking at how we need to approach how we reform or completely deconstruct and remake the police, we need to figure out tiers on actually how to assess and figure out who to actually send in for these individual situations. You know, if it's community based and we know that this person has a history of mental issues and this person is depressed or has suicidal tendencies, maybe it's not the people with guns that we send in. You know, maybe it's somebody who is trained in psychology in a high stress situations that we send in prepared and ready to go and safe for themselves and also safe for the individual that they are trying to aid. I just think bringing in police for every situation that we do, bringing in guns hot in every situation that we go in is just a bad way to do it. And it's just been how we've been doing it for the longest time. And that system itself is broken. You can't fix everything with police officers, and we need to do something better than what we're currently doing.
If I can intervene here.
Go ahead, Mel.
This is a long discussion, actually. There's a lot of things that need to be pointed out.
Yes.
One, so you know, I spent most of my time, a good part of my life, being a human rights activist. I call it, I say my job as a Black person and living in the U.S. as part of an oppressive nation, my job is to keep the wolf from the door on some level, fight the wolf that's really trying to do it. But I always say that other people ought to be working on organizing us, or at least helping keep community together. And everybody's not doing their part. I feel like I do my part. And so, like, if we talk about getting rid of police, right? So that's a complicated thing on some level, but there's certain things like Brother Aaron just talked about, okay? So we could have a community response team that responds to people who are struggling with mental problems, right? Or mental break, or mental crisis. That's one. Two, a lot of times disputes escalate into violence, right? We could have crisis teams, who could intervene in that. Third, and this is important too, people are locked up. A lot of people are locked up because they had an alcohol or drug problem. Those are health problems. Those are social problems, not a criminal problem, you see. So this is back to what the police represent, my friend. But you all need to understand, the police exist to criminalize us, you see. They exist to reinforce criminalization of society, right? And so you do need to get rid of it. So the older people can understand that on some level. They don't want certain things, but you do want somebody to respond. And when we have disputes, when somebody breaks in your house, you want that. But see, the other thing is that, so the other thing that's fueling some of the criminality is the system itself. So you go to school and you pick up with white supremacy, right? We learn it from somewhere, right? So we're indoctrinated. So that we hear out here gangbanging, right? They've given up on society. And part of it is they've internalized racism. They've internalized white supremacy, right? It's called internalized self-hatred. And so they're not looking to shoot the enemy. They're not looking to shoot the enemy, which is a rich or part of 1.1%. That's the real enemy. But they're not even looking to shoot a well-off white person, or not that they should, or white person. Their main enemy is Black people, you see? And they've been programmed that way. So it goes deeper. This is why I say we have to change our society, because even if we change some things about the police, you still have folks who are taking in this white supremacist mentality, who are absorbing it and internalizing it. And so they're going to go out and do stuff. So the community, if for this to work, we got to stop talking about all those nice things. I stop talking about the village and all those wonderful words and make it happen. The truth is, that nobody wants to hear, is that we're less of a village than we were 40, 50, 60 years ago. We ain't looking out for each other. We're operating in the world as individuals, y'all. I'm telling you the truth. I'm gonna point, I can prove that we operate as individuals. All of us sitting here, I know, have seen the study that says if a kid can't read by the time he finishes 3rd grade, he's likely to wind up in a jail cell. All of y'all see. So a community that's a real community, not just talking about community, would have organized to make sure we grab every 3rd grader and make sure that he can read, right? Every church should be tutored. We used to do this. Every church should have a tutoring program. Since we know what part of the problem is, right? We talk that community stuff, but we're not doing it. And if we don't do it, now we got an opportunity. The police will push back. And so a crisis intervention team would answer some of our problems. But we got to do it. It can't be, I can't do it. I can't do everything. And people have to pick it up and say, this is what we're going to do. We should demand, not talking about defunding police. So we should say, we want treatment centers, and also push for, don't put the brother in jail because he had a rock in his pocket, or because he had a joint, because, they've decriminalized most marijuana, not everywhere, right? Don't put people in jail because they got alcohol problem, right? We've got treatment centers. So what has to happen? We can sit and talk all we want. We'll make progress. But if we don't build the other side of this thing, a coin is Some people have to be building community. I'm doing my part. I'm building community in another way, and I'm fighting the system when it pushes against us, and I fight for justice. But folks have got to roll their sleeves up, get off work, and join an organization, a club that's working on one part: education, healthcare, right, treatment, help with the crisis response, help with security and things. Become a community again, because we can talk. We can make all kind of progress, and we'll still be in the same spot, because we all know it, that the kids are supremacy. So at one point when they were doing, remember we had the conscious movement, they were pushing that out. The kids had classes, they were learning learning how to love themselves. We got to do that again, because otherwise we'll make some progress, and kids will, what's going on in my neighborhood late at night? They're a rat-a-tat-tat. They ain't shooting white supremacists. They're shooting at each other. Why? Because they're filled with self-hatred. They're filled with anxiety, so they don't have the things they need to do to be full citizens. And we all know it. And we just walk around, ignore it. And I know we were supposed to get on this, but we've got to make community again, so that when we make these changes, that we can actually begin to embrace them, so we can police ourselves.
I don't think that's fully our fault. I don't believe that that's fully our fault, though. And I think we need to also be aware of that. I think that is another form of racism that we have been experiencing that's not been talked about. I believe that the reason that we are not a community anymore, and that we haven't been for a long time, isn't fully the Black community's fault. I think that's just the way that we were educated and raised. So I was actually thinking about this a little bit when I was watching the movie. I was thinking about the fact that we don't have, why in history and why in life are the only last big social justice warriors that we really remember are Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And I think that's because we have propped them up to almost like our rights and reparations and our equal rights as human beings. I think we kind of propped them up to be like our martyrs, our Jesuses almost, to an extent. When they were killed by our own government, they were propped up and they were made into these glorious people, and they were stated, hey, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, they died so you can have your freedom, you can be seen as an equal rights with like white people and everybody else. So now that they're dead and you suffered, now you have equal rights and you're just like everybody else. So you can go back to your ghettos, you can go back to your poor lives, and you don't have to worry about it because you're equal and you have the same rights as other people in America. And I think that once that happened, and then you get into our terrible education systems that all the people of color are forced to go through, and all of that stuff beats you down as you go through life. And you're told, like, you have these equal rights now. You're just like everybody else. You have the same opportunities as white kids in California who come from like rich families and everyone else. So you don't have to worry about it anymore. So I think when we get like that, and then we're forced to crabs in a barrel and be in these low impoverished communities and all fight for the same little bit of money and deal with all our outside stresses of being poor, being hungry, like not having the resources that you need, and that makes you fight for the little resources from your brother, from your cousin, from your neighbor. It keeps you bogged down. And so all of that together has really sunken the Black community and the people of color community to the state that it's in. And I don't think we are fully blaming that, but you're right. Just to know about it now, we have to try to get back into the community. We have to try to rebuild ourselves and understand that we need to create these pillars. I don't know much about the Black Panthers, but I remember them being a huge movement, and I just don't know what happened to them after a time. All these Black organizations seems to have dissipated as time has gone on, and I don't know where we stand as a community, because we have been broken for as long as I can remember. So, and I don't know where that sits at.
Well, I mean, the Black Panthers, I speak to that. I mean, they were destroyed. I mean, there's a systematically destruction of anything that actually, because a lot of people not
systematically destroyed.
Well, but I think part of what the Black Panthers, the formation was about protection. It was self-defense, and so then it became, by J. Edgar Hoover, they became, radicalized in his mind. Then they were attacked systematically, and so I think that. What one of the things that Mel was saying is, I think we do have to get back to a community approach that we have lost for all the reasons that you mentioned, Aaron. But we have to get back to that. We have to be responsible. One of the things that you guys talked about was, this intervention which I think is a really strong idea. Somebody has to ultimately manage that or dispatch these people. That has to be set up. That may have to be set up from a community source that has to happen, or community involvement or criteria, whatever. I think that has to happen. One of the questions, I just want to jump ahead of here a little bit because we've been getting a lot of questions. Somebody actually, a good question, and it started out what I talked about from protest, which is our right, constitutional right to do protest. There's a process of shifting to the riots. With the problem with the riots sometimes is that some people are fearful of the repercussions of the tear gas, and so it starts to eliminate our troops. Because, and all of us know this, we've all talked about this, is if we don't stay consistent in the process of making demands, this will turn into Ferguson, it will turn into Detroit. I mean, this is what will happen. They wear you down, and pretty soon, you just, it's wash, rinse, and repeat. We'll be, in 5 years or 4 years, we'll be back here talking the same way. So what do you guys think about that? I mean, we have to figure that out. What do we do to secure this process?
So I think right now, there are several things that are happening all at once. And I think we should view sort of the uprisings and sort of the volatileness of those as what they should be. Those are not meant to be sustained. Those are meant to grab the attention and make us focus on the next 10 steps. So what are the next 10 steps? So we just had, a city council that's announced just as by proclamation their intent to do something, right? That's different, right? We have to take that as an opportunity to define what that different thing would be. And that takes organizing work, that takes the work of having constant communication amongst one another and understanding the dynamics that exist right now. Like one of the things I wanted to go back to just slightly is it's important for us not to think of what is happening currently as analog to what the possibilities are, especially within communities, right? Because, this is not going to be a completely 100% volunteer effort. We have $193.3 million that we put into public safety last year through the police budget, right? We have to imagine what that means to allocate those resources to all these things that we're dreaming about, all these community solutions that we're dreaming about. Like these would be folks' jobs and careers, people who are already healers, people who are already, sort of the mind of civic engagement in that particular way. We're just shifting the balance from it being a hammer approach to every problem. And so I just want to make sure that we're not like getting lost in the imagination of this thing and saying, well, we can't get 10 people to come volunteer to do X, Y, and Z right now. Like that's not the dynamic we're shifting. We're not shifting to a completely voluntary situation. We're shifting to a community-funded, community-driven idea of public safety.
Yes.
Well, the Hasidic community has their proactive volunteers. They have a committee, civilian patrols. They have, volunteers. There's a title for it too. Guards. They do that kind of thing. They're unarmed civilians. You can check that out on Wikipedia. I mean, there is a parallel to that. I mean, obviously, the African American community or the Black community or the multicultural community is a lot larger, but there is possibly a sort of a system that could be compared to it, And so, I do think that go ahead, Mel. Sorry.
No, to answer your question, because we got a little off track there.
Yeah, sorry.
Because you were talking about comparing did the riots and the uprising take away from what people were asking. And I think actually, unlike, because this is different from Ferguson, it's different, it's similar, but everybody didn't go up in Ferguson. In fact, we had the first support rally here in Minneapolis for Ferguson. Small towns, so there's something afoot. And so when people go out to protest, I think Aaron talked about this earlier, I've led lots of protests. So, and you were talking about how, the disruption comes. Actually, seldom does a disruption come, not like that, especially when they're organized. Most protests are organized. When they're not organized, the provocateurs take advantage of the opening. And that's what we saw happen on Wednesday night. That Wednesday night is that there weren't nobody leading it. And so the undercover cops, the provocateurs, the white supremacists, anarchist types took advantage of it. And every time you have a protest in the U.S., if more than 100 folks are there, there's an undercover cop, provocateur. And what they want to do is provoke you to do something because it takes away from what you're trying to do. It's chess. You know, the cops had all the focus on them, right? And they wanted to get it off them because they were the savages. They were the wild folks. And so when people began to tear up stuff and loot and burn stuff down, they can say, see, but it didn't work so much because we were able to corral that energy again, right? And make our point without having to tear up stuff. There may come a time when folks had tear, but that wasn't it. And so the demand was out there. That's why they kept giving up stuff. They didn't want to prosecute the cop. As crazy as that sounds, why would you wait a day after seeing that film? There's nothing to wait. You just saw a crime. Well, they waited 2 days before they prosecuted the one cop. Then a few days later to give it the other cops. And now you have to put pressure on them so they can have Mike Freeman sit down. And it's not just Mike Freeman. You know, he's not making these decisions by himself. The system wants to do that. And so the pressure keeps forcing, making change. So we actually have a chance to go past Ferguson because they're talking about, even if it's just cosmetic, they're still all over the country. All kind of police departments are talking about changes. And you have to understand that, like I heard the brother say, you know, it's not, if it was our government, we wouldn't be having this conversation because we wouldn't be having police beat us up. That's what Malcolm said, the government, and we have to make it our government. See, there's all kind of tricks in this. This is not our government. If it was, Black folks would have equal opportunity. I'm just calling it like it is. And so we have to fight so that we do have our government. And so the protest is going into police. I mean, we demanded that we get justice here, right? Look at what happened. We demanded prosecution of police. Now the discussion is about ending the police as we know it. Now there's a shortcut of defunding them, of disbanding them, and because they'll defund it and still keep it in place. But what people are going to be pushing to, because they get it, that this system of policing is the problem, and you know what's going to happen next, y'all. So when people begin to undiscover, when you get all into the bottom and go, oh. The problem is that this system, this social, political, economic system, has a need for this system of policing. You see, then that's when the revolution's coming, because people are going to get to the point where we can't survive. They're not going to let us survive because this system is not designed to give us justice, equal opportunity, or like you pointed out, Brother Aaron, jobs that we need, right? All the stuff that good paying jobs, right? The things that everybody else has. It's not designed to give it to us. No. And as long as we continue with it, it won't do it. It didn't do it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, right? When your grandparents were alive, right? We're in 2020, right? And we still don't have equal opportunity. And just think about how crazy that is. So common sense ought to kick in at some point. We got to realize it's because this system will not allow us to have it. And so the only way we're going to really be free, and let me be clear about this. Some people found a little comfort on the plantation. Some people living in the house were quite comfortable, right? All the slaves weren't trying to get free because they found some comfort. I'm just calling it like it is. And a lot of our people have found some comfort in this unfreedom.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think that, to Aaron brought this up, is that we probably, we don't have a leader. And I grew up with all the leaders from Malcolm X to Martin Luther King to Stokely to, do you think right now we need somebody, we need some type of leadership? I mean, Black Lives Matter is great, it's an organization, but do we need somebody to say, this is what we're going to do? Is that who's going to keep the provocateurs back, or at least get them controlled, something to give us what we're talking about?
Well, in every city, you've got some of that. In every city, shout out to Hakeem Levy Pounds, Jelani Hussein, Michelle Gross, Monique Colors Doty, and a few other folks, myself. After that thing blew up, we organized that Thursday rally. Remember the Thursday rally? 6,000 people marched through downtown, right? 7,000. And now the thing was broken because we organized it. We talked to the crowd and we said, look, we're not going to let them make no sucker out of us, right? Because they want us to destroy stuff. There's going to be a time when you might want to tear this stuff down. I ain't got no love for it either. But you're playing a game of chess. You're in a war. And that's the thing. We're at war. We're in a war, and we don't know that we're in war. So that's why they're kicking our butt. You know, that's going to change. But we got people all over the country, organic people, active, grassroots people who are leading stuff. And unfortunately, what happens is some group of folks will come out and take credit for everything that's being done, or they can write a little better about what they're doing. They're very better funded. And funny, ironically, I'm gonna throw this out here. So lots of well-meaning corporate are trying to fund some of the movement stuff. Ironically, very little of that money is going to go to the organic folks, the people actually spending time getting off work and actually helping teach people, helping organize the protest. Folks who come along late and say that they're doing it, the money is going in their coffin. And I don't know how you can prevent that, to be honest with you, but I think that people ought to speak out about it and say, hey, maybe the guys and the girls, the people who organize that protest, and didn't ask for nothing, maybe we ought to make sure we get them speaker systems so that when they organize a protest, they got the stuff. We ought to buy a stage for the food. People who are keeping it real. Because a lot of folks get this money and there's no accounting of it. None. And that's not cool, right? If nothing else, if they ain't gonna do the work, they should make sure other people get some of them. I don't need any money. I mean, if I'm gonna make my own money or go out and beg folks, but I'm not gonna use the movement and never have to enrich myself. And people are doing, and you're gonna see a lot of that. It's coming. I see DA smiling because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. I ain't gonna call no names, but there's some groups that are gonna use this to enrich themselves. And it's not cool, and they can do things and get money because they talk pretty smooth. They've got nonprofit folks backing them up. You know, they can print all kind of stuff. They got access to, because see, the media likes certain kind of folks. They ain't feeling me too tough. You know what I'm saying? They know I'm the real deal. So, but they like certain kind of people that fits up their image, what they want to see, and so they can write nice press releases and send out stuff all over the place. And they got connections and the man can put them in the front of the movement, kind of like the little move that Al Sharpton made during the funeral, of George Floyd. He put himself in the front of it. He ain't organized. He didn't walk a yard for George Floyd. I'm just telling you like it is. Right? His organization didn't do anything with George Floyd. He got to do the memorial. And he called, that's fine. And if you listen to what he was saying, he's not saying what people in the street, he said in the police lot. People in the street are saying, we want to end to the system of policing. They're saying, abolish the police, defund the police. It's a subtle thing, but the man has lots of tricks, y'all.
And I want to just add,
go ahead,
real quick. I don't think we need like titular heads and leadership in that old world motto. I think we need organizers who are close to communities and they know people in the communities and they can talk to them in a way that's trusted. That's what we need. That's the leadership we need. We don't need somebody at the title head and
I agree. I do
driving the narrative and that kind of thing.
I do absolutely believe that we maybe don't so much need gigantic figureheads anymore, but I do believe the thought of maybe key people. I do believe that there does need to be, if we're going to continue the fight as we are doing the fight, there has to be a higher level of organization than what we currently have. It just has to be. It has to be almost to a national level. We are a divided, tiny community in America. America is huge. We are a small portion of that population. We are getting bigger, but we are still extremely divided. So I think it would be more beneficial for us as a community to have some type of network. So maybe these community organizations and these nonprofits get together, and then this is me just spitballing, so please don't follow me on this completely, but like maybe they create a unit and they represent the Minneapolis unit. So we have all the organizations, the Black organizations that are representing all of these various communities, and then we all meet together and we talk about things that are going on in our city, things that are going on in our county that are affecting us as people of color, that are going on with the police force, that are going on with the government, that are going on with systematic racism. And then having that as a way to report to other people in other states. I just think we need to be more connected than we have been, because it's the division that is getting us. It's the division that is screwing us. When the media blacks out after they get all the video of us rioting and destroying, just like in the movie, and the media blacks out on us, no one pays attention. We have to start protecting ourselves on a wider scale. We have to start coordinating and communicating with each other on a bigger scale than we currently are. We're not going to win. We're too separated, I believe.
Something that actually partially began during the Ferguson uprising, and it has been developing with the technology, is we actually do have an alternative to sort of the single source of media. social media is very strong in sharing stories and sharing, actual accounts in real time about what's going on. And, I've been encouraged by what I've seen, what's happened here in the last 3 weeks, about, the access to information through social media. And I think that's a strong component that's only going to get stronger.
I agree. Sorry, go ahead. No, I was just going to say from an IT and a media aspect, I worry about how we look at social media, because the people that own and operate social media, we don't know where their priorities and we don't know where their allegiances lie. I know for a fact that a lot of political messages are pushed through bots, and that a lot of Black Lives Matter hashtags and stuff like that were used for negative agendas. So while I do believe that we do have a new source of receiving information from each other, communicating with each other, you can't verify the authenticity of the original person who sent or received it. So I'm always hesitant about that when we talk about bringing any type of technology or social media or networking into it, when I can't physically track where it comes from. But that's just me being an IT person.
Audiences have to be active. You got to be a player in this. You can't just be a passive receiver. You gotta know who you're supposed to trust.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got a question here that I wanted to get out there. It's like somebody asked that when you discuss our government, meaning something other than what we have, how do we do that? Is this talk of revolution going to win the hearts and minds of voters at large?
I'm glad people keep raising the voting thing, because we're at a different time. So I'm going to say something that's going to sound absolutely insane. So I'm warning people right up front. What I'm going to say is going to sound insane. So we know that we're not, every 4 years, a Democrat or Republican, right, wins, tells us, hey, we got you, we're going to do something. And every 4 years every year after, they don't do anything for us. So I know it sounds crazy as all get out, but it's like, if they keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and then Joe Biden has told us that we ain't got no choice but to vote for him. And the kicker is, he ain't promised us nothing. So I have an insane idea. Why don't we organize our own party, right? With a platform of the stuff that we want, right? We know what we want. We want to end the police system as we know it. We want housing that everybody can live in, that they can afford, right? We want jobs to give us dignity and enough to live on. We all want healthcare, the same healthcare they have all over Europe, all of the rest of the developed world. I mean, tell me when I'm saying something wrong, right? We want to end to racism. In fact, now the majority of white folk, we want to end even to misogyny, to homophobia. We want a society that doesn't have all those things, right? We want to end to police as we know them, right? So we want to educate. We want a quality education for everybody. All the stuff we need, we all agree on it. So that's what a platform is. That's what a party is about. When Black folks got free after slavery, in one book it says they were wild for politics. They didn't just go and vote for one of these parties. They organized themselves. They put together a platform, and they voted for one of their own, or anybody who agreed with their platform. It's absolutely crazy for us to keep sitting there talking about, well, we got to get rid of Trump, when we had 8 years of a black guy, and we caught hell. We lost lots of money under him. I'm just calling it like it is. Mike Brown was killed under Barack Obama. And when Freddie Gray was killed, he called people in Ferguson thugs. Look it up if you think I'm not telling the truth. He called people in Baltimore thugs, right? And so we had Democratic presidents, we've had Republican presidents. It's time now for us to do for ourselves and to stop having the same, what do they say? We keep doing the same thing over and 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 over, expecting the same response. You might just be out of your mind. So, but I know I'm crazy, so I'm willing. That's why I preface it. I know I'm insane. So
that's why you're the activist, Mel. That's why I wanted you on. No, that's right.
I know it's a crazy idea.
No, but it has some sense to it, you know.
Different take, which is, it may be more attainable. I don't know. That's not necessarily the word I'm going to use. But to me, like, revolutionary acts would be like thinking about what policy affects you the most. It's your local.
Yeah.
And take that over. That's attainable. You can get into the fabric of local decision making and change a lot about the way your life is.
Absolutely.
What affects your life, right?
Absolutely.
And then the whole national politics can take a back seat to that, and people can decide whether they want to engage in that or not. But to me it's critical. The revolution happens on a local level.
No, on both, brother.
Policy level, yeah.
On both. Yeah,
Aaron?
on both. I think you're right. On both. We can get involved locally and nationally because we have a say in all of it. But you're right. And so locally, there's no reason to have to go through a party, right? We can raise money. DA has the best program. We can raise money. I don't have to go to the DFL. So think about that. I can disempower myself basically by going to some other folks who are outside the community. Yeah, we pat you on the head. No. What should give you the stamp of approval is that you have a program that the people in that community and that neighborhood agree with. You see, that's what democracy is supposed to be about. We don't have that. We have people come in all the time talking about, vote for me and I'll set you free, right? That's not democracy. That's, it's kind of pimping on some level. It's like, I got a smooth way of talking. I got a smooth way of being. I think I can lead. Yeah, I see it happen all the time. And then they get all the way, then they start up maybe being organic and they get away from the people because that system corrupts you on some level. That's why we have to have our own people, set up our own program. But the problem, Brother DA, is that it takes work. And what it is, it's much easier to just go along and get along than do the work we know we need to happen to make our society, make it so that we can live. You know what I'm saying? Some things we know we can do. We know what to do. We won't do it because it's a little too much work. But if we keep messing around, and I guarantee you, we're pushing them now. They're gonna push back. Guarantee you that, right? They are going to push back. And so at some point, we're gonna have to wake up and realize all these years, you know what's going on with us? You know why they keep burning down our businesses when we build stuff up? You know why they keep discriminating against you when you're smarter than the guy who applied? You know why they give you less money? You know why they shoot you down the street? Because they're at war with you.
Aaron, you got something to say?
I was thinking, so I would question the starting of a new party because I would like to know how that would work, because being in America, we're generally just a country of two parties. We're one off from being a monarchy. That's always been our thing. We have the Green Party that never really gets anywhere, huge positions of power. So I wonder if starting our own party is the way to go in that aspect. And I wonder what do you imagine, like the steam power, or like how much like power do you think we would get in terms of creating our own party and trying to push that? Like Bernie was running as not a Democrat, and that was a huge issue. Like that was huge for the Democrats. They couldn't stand the fact that Bernie was running as not a Democrat. And that's probably one of the reasons one of the many reasons that he probably isn't actually one of the candidates right now, is because he didn't run as an official Democratic nominee. So I'm wondering if we're going to split from, did he actually run as a Democratic nominee?
Yeah, he did. I mean, Ross Perot was probably the only one that really ran as an independent, and it got pretty close.
And brother Aaron, people were pushing him to a more progressive program, right? And he pulled back. Right. I'm pointing out something really wild. So when the COVID thing hit, and if you were paying attention, remember Trump was floundering, right? He didn't know what to do, right? Think about, had you had that platform, a DA, or I had a platform that Bernie Sanders had, because remember, Biden didn't know what to say. Biden looks like he's on, drugs just to keep him going or something. So right? I mean, so Trump had dropped the ball. The country really needed, you all realize that Bernie Sanders could have stepped in that gap using the virtual, using all the social media stuff. He could have come on virtual, whatever, Facebook and whatever, and every day and said, hey, here's what I think should happen, right? And people would listen to him. Then he'd have made Trump look like the crazy person that he is, right? And he could have actually pointed out to the country, talked about healthcare. See, this is the point I was trying to make about healthcare. You all have to agree that we need healthcare for all. He could have really pushed the platform, and I think done it so well that they may have pushed Joe Biden out and let him be the standard bearer. Or he could have gone independent. Even not winning, he would have had a whole big ticket, right? It's a platform that we all agree on. But even he continues, not even he continues to compromise because they can't let go of that, you know, that Democratic sucker, you know what I'm saying? Because I guess there's something in it.
I think it's all about party lines. I think it all comes down to party lines. The Democrats, it's everybody's a gang at this point in America, and I think that's what we're kind of getting to. Democrats are a gang, Republicans are a gang, police officers are a gang. Everybody's a gang, and everyone's trying to protect themselves, but no one's trying to protect the people in which they are supposed to actually be getting paid to protect. And I think that's the issue that we're having here. Everybody's ganged up, but no one's actually protecting anybody. Everybody's trying to shore up their wallets. Everybody's trying to shore up their future. And then at the end, we always end up being the ones that are suffering for them trying to shore up their future. So that's what I see. Everything's gang mentality right now. So maybe the Crips and the Bloods had the right idea in the beginning. I don't know. I'm starting to see it now that we're having this conversation, that maybe they weren't so crazy after all. If everything's a gang, then yeah, you might as well fly a color, I guess. I don't know. That's crazy to me.
On that note, we're going to have to wrap up here. I appreciate this. We can. It's good. You young people got it right now, but so I want to thank the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. I want O Cinema, Magnolia Films, Film North, and the Film Society for putting this together. I want to thank our guests. You know, DA, Mel, and Aaron, I want to thank you. Next week, we're doing Toni Morrison, and we're going to have Don Renee Jones, Christina Ham, and Nicoma. She's going to be here also for that. Then we're going to do Women in Blue, which is on June 29th and 28th, 29th. They're going to Women in Blue, which is about the Minneapolis Police Department, and they're doing 13th on July 5th and 6th. So we got a couple more of these coming up. Again, I want to thank you guys for doing this. I hope that this encourages people to start putting some thoughts in their minds, start taking action, start trying to keep this movement that we have right now, which is theoretical right now, but it's actually actual on the streets. So again, guys, thank you and good night.
Thank you.